The alarm screamed through the corridors of the UE's Wanderer like a dying animal. And Chief Engineer Marcus Cole knew they were in serious trouble this time around. He ran through the narrow metal hallways with his boots pounding against the floor, his heart racing faster than it had ever raced before in his 32 years of life aboard salvage vessels and cargo ships that crossed the endless darkness between stars. The ship shook violently and threw him against the wall, and he could hear the horrible sound of metal tearing apart somewhere below his feet. A sound that every spacer feared more than anything else in the universe. Hull breach in Cargo Bay 7, the computer announced in its calm and emotionless voice, as if it did not understand that everyone on board was about to die in the cold emptiness of space. Marcus pushed himself off the wall and kept running, but he was going the wrong way, and he knew it, because the escape pods were on the other side of the ship, and he would never make it there in time. The Wanderer had been on a simple salvage mission near the outer rim of human-controlled space when they had encountered something unexpected, an uncharted moon that their sensors had somehow missed until they were already caught in its gravitational pull. But the moon was not empty, and what they had seen on its surface had filled the entire crew with a fear so deep that some of them had frozen at their stations and could not move. Hive structures covered the moon from pole to pole. Massive buildings made of some kind of organic material that pulsed and glowed with bioluminescent light. And Marcus had recognized them immediately from the classified briefings he had received years ago. The Vrythani, the insectoid species that had been silently hunting human ships along the outer rim for the past decade, had built a colony here, and the Wanderer had stumbled right into their territory. The aliens had not waited long before attacking, and their small fighter craft had swarmed the salvage vessel like angry hornets defending their nest, tearing through the hull with weapons that cut through metal like a hot knife through soft butter. Marcus reached the cargo bay just as another explosion rocked the ship, and he grabbed onto a support beam to keep himself from falling, his fingers gripping the cold metal so hard that his knuckles turned white. He could see the breach now, a massive hole in the side of the ship where the stars were visible through the emergency force field that was the only thing keeping the atmosphere inside. But the force field was flickering and failing, and Marcus knew it would not hold for much longer, maybe 30 seconds at most before it collapsed completely. He needed to get out of here right now, but before he could turn and run, the force field made a terrible crackling sound, and then it was gone, and the air began rushing out of the cargo bay with tremendous force. Marcus felt his feet leave the ground as the decompression pulled him toward the breach. And he screamed, but no sound came out because there was no air left to carry his voice. His emergency suit activated automatically and sealed itself around his body, pumping oxygen into his helmet and protecting him from the vacuum of space. But it could not stop him from being sucked out of the ship. He tumbled through the hole in the hull, and suddenly he was falling toward the moon below with nothing to stop his descent. The Vrythani fighters ignored him completely, probably thinking he was just debris or perhaps already dead, and they continued their attack on the Wanderer as Marcus fell through the thin atmosphere of the alien moon. He could see the hive structures getting closer and closer, massive towers and domes made of something that looked like black chitin mixed with hardened resin, and he knew he was going to crash right into one of them. His suit had small emergency thrusters, but they were not powerful enough to slow his fall significantly, only enough to change his angle slightly, and he aimed himself toward what looked like a softer part of the structure. He hit something wet and flexible, a membrane of some kind that stretched under his weight before tearing apart. And then he was falling again, but slower this time, tumbling through a vertical tunnel filled with strange glowing fluid. He bounced off walls that were warm and organic, feeling like the inside of some giant creature rather than a building, and each impact sent pain shooting through his already battered body. Finally, he hit the floor of a chamber and lay there unable to move, his vision blurry and his breath coming in short, painful gasps that fogged up the inside of his helmet. Every part of his body hurt, and he was pretty sure that several of his ribs were broken, and his left leg was twisted at an angle. That legs were definitely not supposed to twist. For a long moment, he just lay there in the darkness, listening to the sound of his own breathing and wondering if this was how he was going to die. Alone on an alien world, surrounded by creatures that saw humans as nothing more than pests to be exterminated. But then the lights came on, a soft bioluminescent glow that spread across the walls and ceiling of the chamber, and Marcus wished the darkness had remained, because what he saw made his blood run cold. He was surrounded by Vrithani warriors, dozens of them standing in a circle around him with their sharp mandibles clicking and their compound eyes, reflecting his own terrified face back at him 1,000 times over. They were bigger than he had expected, each one standing at least 7 feet tall with 4 arms ending in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. And their bodies were covered in black chitin armor that glistened whitely in the strange light. Marcus tried to move, tried to reach for the small emergency pistol on his belt, but his body refused to cooperate, and he could only lie there helplessly as the aliens studied him. He expected them to attack, to tear him apart with those terrible claws, or to drag him away to some horrible fate that he did not want to imagine. But they did not move. They just stood there watching him, waiting for something, and their stillness was somehow more terrifying than any violence could have been. Then the crowd of warriors parted like a curtain being drawn aside, and Marcus saw what they had been waiting for. At the far end of the chamber sat a throne made of crystallized resin that sparkled like dark diamonds in the bioluminescent glow, and upon that throne sat the largest creature Marcus had ever seen in his entire life. She was massive, easily 3 times the size of the warriors around her, with a body that combined the worst features of insects and nightmares into something that should not exist in any sane universe. Her carapace was ancient and scarred, marked with wounds from battles fought long before humanity had even learned to use fire, and her eyes were vast multifaceted orbs that seemed to see everything at once. The Queen of the Vrithani looked down at the broken human lying on the floor of her chamber, and Marcus could feel the weight of her intelligence pressing against his mind like a physical force. A small drone floated near her head, humming softly as it translated her clicking and chittering sounds into words that Marcus could understand through his suit's communication system. "A human," the Queen said, and her voice through the translator was cold and curious at the same time. "Has fallen into my chamber like fruit dropping from a tree, and my children did not kill it before I could see it for myself." Marcus wanted to say something brave, something defiant that would show these aliens that humans were not afraid of them, but all he could manage was a weak cough that sent pain shooting through his broken ribs. The Queen leaned forward on her throne, her massive head tilting to one side as she studied him with those terrible ancient eyes. And Marcus had the sudden feeling that he was being evaluated by something far older and far more dangerous than he could possibly comprehend. "You are the species that does not surrender," the Queen said slowly, and there was something in her voice that might have been respect or might have been hunger. Marcus could not tell which. And lying there broken and bleeding on the floor of an alien queen's chamber, surrounded by warriors who could kill him with a single swipe of their claws, Marcus Cole began to understand that his accident might have been the most important thing that ever happened to him. Marcus lay on the cold organic floor of the chamber and waited for death to come. But the Vrithani Queen made no move to order his execution, and the warriors around him remained perfectly still like statues carved from living chitin. The translation drone floated closer to him, its soft humming the only sound in the vast chamber besides the clicking of mandibles and the wet, organic sounds of the hive itself breathing all around them. "We have watched your species for 3 cycles, the Queen said through the drone, her voice filling the chamber with cold authority. "And in all that time we have never captured one of you alive before this moment." Marcus tried to push himself up onto his elbows, but the pain in his ribs made him gasp and fall back down, and he could taste blood in his mouth from where he had bitten his tongue during the fall. "Your kind always fights until death takes them," the Queen continued. "And even when they are surrounded and outnumbered and have no chance of victory, they still refuse to lay down their weapons and accept the mercy of the hive." She rose from her throne and began to descend toward him, her massive body moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. And each step she took made the floor vibrate beneath Marcus like a small earthquake. "We do not understand this behavior," the Queen said, stopping just a few feet away from where Marcus lay. "And what the hive does not understand, the hive must learn. For knowledge is the greatest weapon in the universe." Marcus forced himself to speak despite the pain, his voice coming out as a rough whisper through his damaged helmet speakers. "What do you want from me?" The Queen made a sound that the translator could not quite interpret, something between a laugh and a growl, and her mandibles clicked together in a pattern that might have been amusement. "I want you to explain your species to me, little human," she said. "I want to understand why you are so different from every other civilization we have encountered in our 10,000 cycles of existence." She gestured with one of her massive limbs, and suddenly the air in front of Marcus came alive with holographic images projected from devices hidden somewhere in the walls of the chamber. He saw human ships, human colonies, human soldiers fighting against the Vrithani in battles that had taken place across dozens of different worlds over the past decade. "Watch," the Queen commanded, "and then tell me what I am seeing." The first image showed a small cargo vessel surrounded by Vrithani fighters, outnumbered at least 20 to 1 with no hope of escape or survival. Instead of surrendering, the human crew had overloaded their reactor and rammed their ship directly into the largest Vrithani carrier, destroying both vessels in a massive explosion that lit up the darkness of space. "They could have surrendered," the Queen said, "and we would have taken them as servants to the hive, a fate far better than death in the cold void between stars, but they chose destruction instead." The next image showed a human colony on a small moon, surrounded by thousands of Vrithani warriors who had given the colonists 1 hour to surrender before the attack began. The colonists had used that hour to rig every building in the settlement with explosives, and when the Vrithani breached the walls, the entire colony had exploded and taken half the attacking force with it. "They killed themselves rather than serve us," the Queen said, and there was genuine confusion in her voice now. "They destroyed everything they had built over many years rather than let it fall into our hands." But it was the third image that made Marcus catch his breath, because he recognized the soldiers in it, men and women from the Outer Rim Defense Force who had been stationed at Colony 17. They were surrounded by Vrithani warriors, at least 50 aliens for every human defender, and their ammunition was almost gone, and their walls were crumbling, and everyone watching knew they were going to die. But they were not running, and they were not begging for mercy, and one of them was actually laughing as he fired his last rounds into the advancing swarm. The audio came through the hologram, broadcasting the final message that the defenders had sent to Earth before they triggered the colony's emergency: self-destruct. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of Colony 17, a woman's voice said, calm and clear despite the chaos around her. "We are overrun and cannot hold any longer. But we want you to know something important back home." There was an explosion in the background and the sound of aliens screeching, but the commander kept speaking. "Tell them we did not kneel," she said. "Tell them we stood until the end, and tell our families that we loved them and we thought of them in our final moments." The hologram showed the colony exploding in a brilliant flash of light that consumed both the defenders and the attackers, leaving nothing behind but dust and debris. The Queen turned to look at Marcus, and in her ancient eyes he could see something he had never expected to find there, something that looked almost like fear. "Explain this to me," she demanded. Explain why your kind chooses death over service, destruction over survival, why you fight with such fury even when there is no hope of victory. Marcus stared at the fading hologram, at the place where Commander Chun and her soldiers had made their final stand, and he felt a strange pride rising in his chest despite his pain and fear. "You really do not understand, do you?" he said, and it was not a question, but a statement of fact. "We have conquered 1,000 species across 1,000 worlds," the Queen said, "and every single one of them eventually surrendered when they realized they could not win. Every single one of them accepted their place in the hive when the alternative was extinction." She leaned closer to Marcus, her massive head filling his entire field of vision, and her breath was warm and smelled like something ancient and organic. "But your species is different," she said. "In 3 cycles of war, we have never received a single surrender, never captured a single human who was willing to serve the hive, never broken the will of even one of your soldiers." Marcus laughed, and it hurt his ribs terribly, but he could not stop himself, because the situation was so absurd that laughter was the only response that made sense. "Of course you have not broken us," he said, "and you never will, because you do not understand what we are." The Queen pulled back slightly, and the warriors around them shifted uncomfortably, their mandibles clicking with agitation at the humans' defiance. "Then explain," the Queen said. "Teach me what I do not know, because the hive has decided that understanding your species is more important than simply destroying you." Marcus looked up at the ancient alien queen, at the creature who had probably ordered the deaths of thousands of humans, and he realized that this might be the most important conversation any human had ever had with an alien being. "You want to know why we fight," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "You want to know why we never surrender, why we choose death over servitude." "Yes," the Queen said. "This knowledge has eluded us for 3 cycles, and we have lost more warriors trying to conquer your species than we have lost against all other civilizations combined." Marcus pushed himself up into a sitting position, ignoring the screaming pain in his body, because this was too important to say while lying on his back like a defeated animal. "The answer is simple," he said, "but you will not like it, because it reveals a truth about your own existence that you have probably never considered." The Queen said nothing, just waited with the patience of a creature that had lived for centuries and would live for centuries more. "You are a hive mind," Marcus said, "which means that when one of you dies, the hive continues, the memories survive, the consciousness goes on." The Queen nodded slowly, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the bioluminescent light. "But humans are different," Marcus continued, and his voice grew stronger as he spoke. "Every single human is alone inside their own head, separate from all other humans, and when we die forever." He looked directly into the Queen's ancient eyes and spoke the truth that defined his entire species. "We fight because we have nothing to lose except our own brief existence, and we would rather end that existence on our own terms than surrender it to anyone else." The Queen stared at Marcus for a long moment, her massive body completely still, and the warriors around them held their breath as they waited for their ruler to respond to the human's words. Then she made that strange sound again, the one that fell somewhere between laughter and a growl, and her mandibles clicked together in a rapid pattern that the translation drone struggled to interpret. "You speak of death as if it matters," the Queen said finally. "But death is simply a transition, a returning of resources to the collective, nothing more and nothing less." Marcus shook his head, wincing at the pain the movement caused, but refusing to back down from this conversation that might be the most important one of his entire life. "That is exactly my point," he said. "You do not fear death because for you, death is not really an ending. The hive continues even when individual members fall." He gestured at the warriors around them, at the countless Rhythani who stood watching with their compound eyes and their clicking mandibles. "If one of them dies right now, You will feel it through your connection to the hive, Marcus said. You will know they are gone. But their memories and experiences will remain part of the collective consciousness forever. The Queen tilted her head, considering his words with the careful attention of a scientist examining a new specimen. This is true, she admitted. When a child of the hive falls in battle, their essence returns to us, and nothing is truly lost except the physical form which can be replaced. But for humans, death is absolute, Marcus said, and his voice carried the weight of a truth that his species had carried since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. When I die, everything that makes me who I am will simply stop existing, he continued. My memories will fade. My thoughts will end. My hopes and dreams and fears will vanish as if they never existed at all. He laughed again, and this time the laugh was bitter and sad and defiant all at the same time. You want to know why we do not surrender, he said. It is because surrender means our one brief moment of existence meant nothing. That we lived and died without ever standing for something greater than ourselves. The Queen rose to her full height, towering over the broken human like a mountain of chitin and ancient wisdom, and her eyes seemed to glow with an intensity that Marcus had not seen before. You are saying that your defiance comes from fear, she said. Fear of death, fear of meaninglessness, fear of being forgotten. No, Marcus said firmly. I am saying our defiance comes from the opposite of fear. It comes from accepting our mortality and choosing to make it matter. He struggled to his feet, his broken legs screaming in protest, and he leaned against a nearby pillar of organic material to keep himself upright. Every human knows from childhood that we are going to die, he said. We do not hide from this truth or pretend it does not exist. We live with it every single day of our lives. The warriors shifted uncomfortably, and Marcus could sense their confusion, their inability to comprehend what he was describing. We build cities knowing that one day they will crumble, he continued. We write books knowing that eventually they will be forgotten. We fall in love knowing that either we will watch our loved ones die or they will watch us die. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, filled with a passion that surprised even himself. And yet we do these things anyway, he said. We create and love and dream and hope, not despite knowing we will die, but because knowing we will die makes every moment precious. The Queen descended from her elevated position and approached Marcus slowly, her massive form moving with that impossible grace that made her seem almost like a force of nature rather than a living creature. You speak of your weakness as if it were strength, she said. You describe your mortality as if it were a gift rather than a curse. Because it is both, Marcus replied. Our mortality is our greatest weakness and our greatest strength. The thing that breaks us and the thing that makes us unbreakable. He met the Queen's gaze without flinching, standing as tall as his broken body would allow. A species that cannot truly die cannot truly live, he said. You have existed for 10,000 cycles, but have you ever felt the desperate urgency of knowing your time is running out? The Queen was silent, and for the first time Marcus saw something flicker in her ancient eyes. Something that might have been doubt or might have been the first stirring of understanding. Have you ever loved someone so fiercely that the thought of losing them made you want to destroy worlds? He asked. Have you ever worked on a project with the knowledge that you might not live to see it completed? The hive does not experience such things, the Queen admitted. Individual attachments are inefficient, and projects are completed by whoever remains to finish them. Then you have never truly experienced what it means to be alive, Marcus said, and there was no mockery in his voice, only a strange kind of pity. When a human mother holds her child for the first time, she knows that child will one day die, and that knowledge makes her love that child with a ferocity that you cannot imagine. He thought of his own mother back on Earth, of the way she had cried when he had left for his first assignment on a salvage vessel, knowing she might never see him again. When a human artist creates a painting or writes a song, they know that eventually their work will be forgotten. But they create anyway because the act of creation gives meaning to their brief existence. The Queen made a sound that the translator interpreted as contemplation, a deep thrumming that seemed to resonate with the very walls of the chamber. "You are describing something we have never encountered," she said slowly. "A species driven not by survival or expansion or the continuation of genetic material, but by the need to find meaning in the face of inevitable annihilation." "Yes," Marcus said, "and that is why your warriors will never break us, why your fleets will never conquer us, why every human will fight until their last breath, even when there is no hope of victory." He stepped closer to the Queen, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her massive body. "Because to us, a meaningful death is infinitely preferable to a meaningless life," he said. "We would rather burn out in a blaze of defiance than fade away in the slow darkness of servitude." The warriors around them were clicking their mandibles frantically now, clearly disturbed by what they were hearing, but the Queen silenced them with a single gesture. "And you believe this makes you stronger than us," she said. "You believe your mortality is an advantage rather than a weakness." Marcus shook his head. "I believe it makes us different from you," he said. "And in that difference lies a power that your hive mind cannot comprehend or defeat." He spread his arms wide, gesturing at the chamber around them, at the entire high structure that surrounded them on all sides. "You have conquered species that live for millennia and species that live for mere decades," he said. "But they all surrendered eventually because they believed that survival was the ultimate goal." His voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire chamber. "Humans do not believe that survival is the ultimate goal," he said. "We believe that how we live and how we die matters more than simply continuing to exist. And that is something you can never take from us." The Queen stood motionless for a long time, processing what she had heard. And when she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that made the air itself seem to tremble. "In 10,000 cycles," she said, "no one has ever explained their species to me in such a way, and no one has ever made me question the nature of the hive itself." She turned and began walking back toward her throne, her massive body casting shadows that danced across the walls. "You have given me much to consider, little human," she said, "and I believe this conversation is far from over." Marcus collapsed against the pillar as the Queen returned to her throne, his body finally giving out after the effort of standing and speaking for so long. His broken leg could no longer support his weight, and his ribs were screaming with every breath he took. And he wondered how much longer he could survive without medical attention. But before he could worry too much about his injuries, the Queen raised one massive limb and made a gesture that sent several of the warriors scurrying out of the chamber through passages, hidden in the organic walls. "You are damaged," the Queen said through the translation drone, "and a damaged specimen cannot provide useful information, so I have summoned those who can repair you." Marcus was not sure if he should be relieved or terrified by this announcement, because he had no idea what Vrythani medical treatment would look like or what it might do to a human body. Within minutes, a group of different Vrythani entered the chamber, and Marcus immediately noticed that they were not warriors like the others he had seen. These aliens were smaller and more delicate, with extra limbs that ended in precise manipulators rather than claws, and their compound eyes had a different quality to them, something that suggested intelligence focused on healing rather than killing. "Surgeons," the Queen explained, "bred specifically for the purpose of maintaining and repairing the bodies of the hive. They will make you whole again." Marcus wanted to protest, wanted to refuse treatment from aliens who had killed so many of his people. But his body had other ideas, and he found himself unable to resist as the surgeons approached. They lifted him with surprising gentleness, their manipulators careful not to cause additional pain, and they carried him to a section of the chamber that seemed to transform before his eyes. The organic walls parted to reveal a space filled with strange equipment and glowing liquids. And Marcus realized he was looking at some kind of medical facility grown directly from the living material of the hive itself. The surgeons laid him on a surface that molded itself to his body like a living mattress. And then they began their work with a precision and care that Marcus had not expected from the Vrythani. They removed his damaged suit piece by piece, exposing his broken body to the warm air of the chamber. And then they began applying substances and using tools that were completely alien to anything Marcus had ever seen. A gel was spread over his broken ribs that seemed to penetrate his skin and wrap around the bones themselves, stabilizing them and beginning some kind of accelerated healing process. His leg was straightened with quick, precise movements that should have been agonizing but somehow only produced a dull ache. And then the same gel was applied to the fracture. The entire process took several hours, during which Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind struggling to process everything that was happening to him. When he finally woke fully, he found himself wearing a simple garment made of some soft material, and his body felt better than it had since before the crash. His ribs still ached, but the sharp stabbing pain was gone, and when he carefully moved his leg, he found that while it was still weak, it could bear his weight without screaming in protest. The queen was still on her throne, watching him with those ancient, multifaceted eyes, and Marcus had the strange feeling that she had been watching him the entire time he was unconscious. "The surgeons have done well," she said. "Your body will require several more treatments to fully heal, but you are no longer in danger of dying from your injuries." Marcus stood carefully, testing his repaired limbs, and nodded his thanks even though he was still not sure how to feel about receiving medical care from aliens, who were technically his enemies. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why save me? Why heal me? Why not just take whatever information you needed and then dispose of me like you have disposed of so many other humans?" The queen made that thrumming sound again, the one that seemed to indicate deep thought. "Because you have shown me something I have not seen in 10,000 cycles of existence," she said. "You have shown me that the hive may have been approaching this conflict incorrectly from the very beginning." She descended from her throne again and approached Marcus. But this time, her movements seemed different, less predatory and more contemplative. "For 3 cycles, we have tried to conquer your species through force," she said. "We believed that eventually you would break like all the others, that your defiance would crumble in the face of overwhelming power." Her mandibles clicked in what the translator interpreted as frustration. "But you have made me understand that force alone will never defeat a species that does not fear death, that views meaningful destruction as preferable to meaningless survival." Marcus stood his ground as the queen stopped just a few feet away from him, close enough that he could see his own reflection in her massive compound eyes. "So what now?" he asked. "If you cannot conquer us, what will you do? Destroy us entirely? Wipe humanity from the universe because you cannot make us kneel?" "That option has been considered," the queen admitted, and Marcus felt his blood run cold at the casual way she spoke of genocide. "But it would require resources and casualties that the hive cannot afford," she continued. "Your species has proven remarkably efficient at taking our warriors with them when they die, and a war of extermination would weaken us against other threats." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Marcus understand he was hearing something unprecedented. "There is another option," she said, "one that has never been offered to any species in the entire history of the Vrythani hive." Marcus waited, his heart pounding in his chest, as the queen raised one massive limb in a gesture that seemed almost ceremonial. "I propose a truce," she said, "not peace, because the hive does not truly understand the concept of peace, but a mutual acknowledgement that we are equals." Marcus could not believe what he was hearing, and he wondered for a moment if he was still unconscious and dreaming. "You want a truce," he repeated. After all the humans you have killed, after all the colonies you have destroyed, you want to simply stop fighting. I want something more than that, the Queen said. I want to learn from your species, to understand this thing you call mortality and how it gives you such strength. Her voice dropped to something that sounded almost like reverence. You spoke of loving fiercely because time is short, she said. You spoke of creating meaning in the face of inevitable death. You spoke of experiences that the hive has never known in 10,000 cycles of existence. She leaned closer to Marcus, and her eyes seemed to glow with an intensity that he had not seen before. I want to know what it feels like to be an individual, she said. To face death alone and still find reasons to continue. To experience the desperate, beautiful urgency that drives your species to such extraordinary acts. Marcus stared at the alien queen, at this ancient being who had ruled a civilization that spanned countless worlds. And he understood that he was witnessing something that might change the course of galactic history. You want us to teach you how to be mortal, he said slowly. You want to understand what it means to die alone and still find meaning. Yes, the Queen said simply, and in exchange, the Vrithani will withdraw from human space. We'll stop hunting your ships and attacking your colonies. We'll treat your species as equals rather than prey. She extended one bladed limb toward Marcus, not in threat but in what seemed like an offer of alliance. Will you carry this message to your people? She asked. Will you tell them that the Queen of the Vrithani seeks not conquest but understanding? Marcus looked at the extended limb, at the creature who had ordered the deaths of thousands of his people, and he thought about Commander Chun and her soldiers who had died rather than surrender. He thought about what they would want him to do in this moment, and he realized that they had not died so that the war could continue forever. They had died so that one day, somehow, their sacrifice might lead to something better. I will carry your message, Marcus said, and he reached out and touched the Queen's limb in a gesture of acceptance that bridged the gap between species. And I hope that my people will listen. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus Cole had fallen through the membrane of an alien hive and into the chamber of the Vrithani Queen, and in that time his entire understanding of the universe had changed. He stood now on the bridge of a Vrithani bioship, watching through organic viewports as the vessel approached the edge of human-controlled space. And he could not help but marvel at how different everything looked from this perspective. The bioship was alive in a way that human vessels could never be. Its walls pulsing with bioluminescent light. Its systems responding to the thoughts of its crew rather than mechanical controls. Its very structure capable of healing itself when damaged. A small escort of Vrithani warriors accompanied Marcus, not as guards but as something more like an honor guard, beings assigned to protect him and ensure his safe delivery to his own people. The Queen had spent the remaining weeks teaching Marcus about Vrithani society, showing him the inner workings of the hive in ways that no human had ever seen before. He had learned that the Vrithani were not the mindless insects that humanity had believed them to be, but a complex civilization with art and philosophy and dreams of their own. He had learned that the Queen was not a tyrant ruling through fear, but the central consciousness of a vast collective, feeling every death and every birth, carrying the weight of billions of minds within her own. And he had learned that despite their power and their ancient wisdom, the Vrithani were afraid of something that they could barely comprehend. The idea of individual mortality that humans carried with them every day of their lives. The bioship slowed as it approached the boundary between Vrithani and human space, and Marcus felt his heart begin to race as he realized that the moment of truth was finally here. He carried with him a data crystal containing a message from the Queen to Earth's united government. A message that could end a war that had claimed thousands of lives on both sides. But he also carried something more important, the knowledge and understanding that he had gained during his time in the hive. Insights that might help humanity see their ancient enemy in a completely different light. "We are being hailed by human vessels," one of the Vraithani escorts said, their mandibles clicking nervously. "They are demanding that we identify ourselves and state our intentions." Marcus moved to the communication station, which was really just an organic membrane that responded to touch and thought, and he prepared to make the most important transmission of his life. "This is Chief Engineer Marcus Cole of the UES Wanderer," he said, broadcasting on all frequencies. "I am aboard a Vraithani vessel as an ambassador, not a prisoner. And I am carrying a message from the Vraithani Queen to Earth's united government." There was a long silence, and Marcus could imagine the confusion and disbelief that must be spreading through the human ships that had detected the approaching alien vessel. "Marcus Cole is listed as killed in action," a voice finally responded. "The Wanderer was destroyed 3 weeks ago with no survivors. Identify yourself properly, or we will open fire." Marcus smiled, understanding their caution and appreciating that they were not willing to simply trust a voice claiming to be a dead man on an enemy ship. "My service number is 7-7-4-2-9, he said. "My mother's name is Elena Cole, and she lives in New Geneva on Earth. I have a scar on my left shoulder from a welding accident during my first year as an engineer." He paused, trying to think of something only the real Marcus Cole would know. "When I was 16, I crashed my father's hover car into the lake behind our house and told him it had been stolen. He never believed me, but he never told my mother either." Another long silence, and then a different voice came over the communication system, older and more authoritative. "Stand down all weapons," the voice commanded. "That is definitely Marcus Cole. Only that idiot would admit to the hover car incident on an open channel." Marcus laughed, recognizing the voice of Admiral Chun, the father of Commander Sarah Chun, who had died at Colony 17. "Admiral Chun," Marcus said, "I have information that you need to hear. Information that could change everything about this war." "Then come aboard," the Admiral replied. "We will escort the alien vessel to a neutral location where we can talk, and I hope for your sake that this is not some kind of trick." The next few hours were a blur of activity as Marcus was transferred to a human vessel and subjected to medical scans, psychological evaluations, and endless questions from military intelligence officers who seemed convinced he had been brainwashed or replaced by an alien duplicate. But eventually, they accepted that he was really Marcus Cole, somehow still alive and apparently sane, and they agreed to listen to what he had to say. Marcus stood before a council of the highest-ranking military and civilian leaders in human space, men and women who held the fate of the entire species in their hands, and he told them everything. He told them about falling into the Queen's chamber, about the conversation they had shared, about the truth he had witnessed in the eyes of an ancient being who had lived for thousands of years. He told them about the truths the Queen had offered, about her desire to learn from humanity rather than conquer it, about the possibility of ending a war that had cost so many lives. And when he was finished, he played the Queen's message, her voice filling the chamber with words that no one had ever expected to hear from a Vraithani. "People of Earth," the Queen said through the translation, "for 3 cycles I have waged war against your species, believing that you would eventually break, as all others have broken. But your Marcus Cole has shown me that I was wrong, that your species possesses something unique in all the universe, a strength born from mortality that the Hive cannot defeat. I offer you a truce, not because I am weak, but because I have come to respect an enemy that refuses to kneel even in the face of certain death. Let there be no more killing between our peoples. Let us instead learn from each other. And let the universe witness something that has never happened before. 2 species choosing understanding over annihilation." The message ended, and the chamber was silent as the leaders of humanity processed what they had heard. Admiral Chun was the first to speak, his voice heavy with emotion as he thought of his daughter who had died fighting the Vraithani. My Sarah died believing she was protecting humanity from monsters, he said slowly. And now you are telling me that those monsters want to make peace. With respect, Admiral, Marcus said gently, your daughter died proving to the Vrethani that humanity could not be broken. Her sacrifice is part of what convinced the Queen that this war could never be won. He stepped forward, looking around at the assembled leaders. Every human who fought and died against the Vrethani contributed to this moment, he said. Their defiance, their refusal to surrender, their willingness to die rather than kneel. All of it showed the Queen that we are something her species has never encountered before. And what is that? Another leader asked. Marcus smiled, thinking of the Queen and her ancient eyes, thinking of the conversations they had shared in the depths of the hive. We are mortal beings who have learned to find meaning in our mortality, he said. We are individuals who face death alone and still choose to love and create and hope. The Vrethani have lived for 10,000 cycles, but they have never truly experienced what it means to be alive, and they want us to teach them. The debate that followed lasted for days, with some leaders arguing for rejecting the truce and continuing the war until the Vrethani were destroyed, while others saw an opportunity to end the bloodshed and build something new. In the end, humanity chose hope over fear, and the truce was accepted. Marcus Cole returned to Earth a hero, though he never saw himself as one, and in the years that followed, he served as an ambassador between two species that had once been mortal enemies. The Vrethani kept their word, withdrawing from human space and beginning a slow process of cultural exchange that would transform both civilizations in ways no one could have predicted. And when journalists asked Marcus what he had witnessed in the Queen's chamber, what had really happened during those 3 weeks on an alien moon, he always gave the same answer. I saw an empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds, realized that all their power could not match the strength of beings who know they will die and choose to live anyway. He would pause then, looking out at the stars that humans and Vrethani now shared in peace. I saw an entire civilization learn the most important lesson in the universe. He would say that mortality is not a curse but a gift, and that the knowledge of death is what makes life worth living. Years later, when Marcus Cole finally passed away at the age of 92, surrounded by friends and family, and even a few Vrethani who had come to pay their respects, the Queen herself sent a message to Earth. Marcus Cole taught us what it means to be mortal, she said, and in doing so, he gave the Vrethani something we had sought for 10,000 cycles without knowing it: the ability to truly live. He was the first human we ever spoke with as equals, and we will remember him for as long as the hive endures and on Earth. They built a memorial to the man who had ended a war not with weapons or strategies, but with a simple truth about what it meant to be human. The inscription on the memorial read, "In the darkest void, humanity carried a light the universe had never seen. Not fire, not fusion, but something far more powerful.